and basically the whole idea of cutting the seal once globalism kicks in and we take Mexico in as part of America, you know.
Yeah, and that's another big thing too is taking Mexico in
Mm.
seems like what we're doing now with Trump.
I know.
And so it was all misdirection going for Canada because
Yeah,
what they really want is Mexico because
yeah.
Mexico is their tie back to Atlantis.
The Mesoamerican and the Chicao early Masonic orders are said to have come out of the Mayan practices.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess we're
Is
we're starting.
that
Right?
where they think Atlantis is?
Well, the Mayans
Or
say
was?
they came from Atoll.
Atoll?
Atoll.
Where's Atoll?
That's a name for Atlantis.
Okay.
In the because they had to flee because of a catastrophe. So and they claim their lineage back to Atoll.
Huh.
Yeah.
The Aztecs believe that they came from a place up north called
Mhm.
Asman.
Yeah. And that sounds like what is it, Ultima Thule, something along those lines.
Well, there is evidence to show that there were tribes going back and forth, around the peninsula or the what's that California peninsula right there that just runs off
Baja.
the Baja Peninsula,
Yeah, yeah,
going back and forth across that desert. There were,
yep,
Anasazi and all the rest of this stuff.
yeah. And going to about Mesa Verde, that whole area. And you've got petroglyphs. I've hiked out and seen them, but it's basically they talk about fleeing a catastrophe, man. You know, that's why they were on top of the green table, the mesa. So what's up, Nick?
What's up? What's up?
So, do you guys have the link? I think we can pull it up and just start looking through it. If you go to archive.org and
Yeah.
pull up 68th Convocation, there's a little search bar where you can just type in anything and then just go straight to it. So you
To the
find a
words,
bunch of
yeah.
stuff. Yeah. You can use the keyword search and just boom, it's right there. So the 68th Convocation is a book about
Well, I don't know. Are we recording it?
We
yeah,
are.
Oh, we are. Okay, go. Sorry.
it's a book about the meeting between the Freemasons, the Illuminati, the Rosicrucians, and I think there's a couple of other groups.
Yeah.
And this meeting took place in 1916 at Beverly Hall in Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Right.
And so this meeting has the notes, right, from this meeting and all of the topics they were talking about. But what's interesting is that there were 67 other convocations before this one. And the only one that really came out was this one because of Bill Cooper. So Bill Cooper got this sent to him in the mail, the 68th Convocation, because somebody found it in a library somewhere. And so as soon as the conspiracy theorists got their hands on it, they just made copies and widely distributed it everywhere. So that's one of the ways that it made it up onto right here on the Internet Archive, is
Right.
because it was a pretty significant book. So, right here on the front cover, you've got the Masonic triangle and everything else sort of, existing in there. But as you go down a couple of pages, you can see the seal of the United States.
Right. And it's funny how they have the reverse side first. No, they have that's the correct order. So the reverse side is the pyramid with the eye on top.
So what year did we adopt this as the seal?
1932.
This is 1916.
1916. They're planning out America's destiny before it reaches the mainstream. So this is one of the reasons why Bill Cooper was so thrilled with finding this, is because it proves that not only are all these different mystery schools and all these different mystery cults getting together and making decisions about the United States, but it's central to how the United States is perceived around the world.
Right. And interestingly, as far as the whole reverse seal being the pyramid with the eye, they specifically talk about that this is the tenet of the Illuminati and that these are the teachings of the Illuminati within the book itself.
Right. And the Illuminati are present at this meeting. So whoever
Right,
they
right.
are, they're here.
Well, and when you go through this, they're talking about sin and moral rectitude and reincarnation and the Christ consciousness. And they also mention the fact that Jesus was just a regular guy, that was his last reincarnation cycle, and he was in like the Christ or the Christ consciousness. So this is also preaching the idea of Christ consciousness as well, like Krishnamurti and Theosophy.
Exactly. There's a huge theosophical influence in this book. And when you consider that theosophy had been around since the 1860s, right? For them to have this kind of an influence on this book is pretty huge. It's saying that all these different cults, all these different, mystery schools and everything else are going by what the theosophists developed in, late 1900s.
Yeah.
So that's, this could be what they wanted as a one world religion coming through these pages. And this was back in 1916. So they've been planning this stuff for a long time.
A long time. And they talk about, at least within the section on the Great Seal, that the reverse of the Great Seal has never been cut into a die. And that it won't be cut into a die until America has absorbed Mexico. And if you look up on Google, I actually looked up on Google, and when you read it, it says, I asked, has the seal ever been cut? And they said, no, the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States has never been cut into a die. And it says the reverse seal was designed in 1782, but it was never intended to be used separately from the obversed.
Right. So we're dealing with something very holy and sacred to whatever this religion is.
Right.
And a lot of people don't know about this book because, I think most researchers think of it as being too weighty or being too occulty for them to understand.
Yeah, to me, it kind of fell into the idea that it's just another modern Rosicrucian kind of, and that's the thing. You go back to the early Rosicrucians, and they were more dealing with alchemical ideas and the way to kind of, turn lead into gold, or the body into immortality, and then you come forward to these newer Rosicrucian type documents in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and they're all about shaping the man, moral rectitude. It's a completely different kind of philosophy than the early Rosicrucian stuff you look at.
Right, which plays a major factor in America's post-war period because they got really, really interested in doing more social engineering.
Right.
Then they were involved in the hard sciences and trying to figure out all the buttons to push to get nature working in a certain direction. So this sort of shifted. I think it represents a previous shift that had been coming for a while, but they were no longer interested in the spiritual aspects as much as they were in shaping the human mind.
Right.
You get that in a big way. Now, this book is connected to another book by Manly P. Hall called The Destiny of America.
Right.
And that one is really interesting too, because he says all the way back in the time of Francis Bacon,
I was going to mention that. Yeah.
He believed that America could be the new Atlantis.
Right.
So from that point forward, you're starting to get this idea of the place where we're living as being their kind of holy grail. And if you think about the pivot from going from these alchemical hard sciences to now this focus on shaping the human mind, they're trying to get the utopia the same way that communists try to achieve utopia, is by changing the man.
Right. And now there is a great deal of information in this as well about it goes on at some length about the souls from Lemuria had reincarnated into Atlantis and basically took that civilization to the height that basically, it collapsed. And basically now all those souls from Atlantis are being, reincarnated in the Americas for the same type of purpose.
Why don't we get to those portions? If you could hit the little search button and hit Atlantis in that search bar.
Yeah, up here in the left-hand corner, there you go.
Yeah, just type in Atlantis and away you go. So I think, here we go.
And if you want to read.
When Atlantis ruled the world, that which is now America was connected with Egypt by what is now Mexico, and in Mexico, in the territory of the Yucatan, there is a pyramid in which the fire philosophers worship God as divided fire and life in like manner as did the initiates of Egypt, for the two were one.
You can zoom in down the
Oh,
bottom
there we
corner. Yeah.
So, Nick, do you remember the Order of Quetzalcoatl doing their fire dance at the pyramids?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, they're big with Mexico. There's a lot of people who like Manson was headed to Mexico for a reason. There's a lot of
Yep.
people who gone to Mexico for cult reasons. Crowley's
Reasons, yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't that where Crowley got his 33-degree initiation?
I don't know. I know there was something he came up with while he was there.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that was in South America, if I remember right.
Well, I think it was in Mexico because Crowley hooked up with the president of Mexico at the time.
Right.
And
Oh,
they were
shit.
touring for days. And in England and Europe, they didn't want to give Crowley his degrees because they hated the guy.
Right.
But Mexico, the president and one of these Freemason guys hooked him up and gave him his 33rd degree while he was out in the desert, doing butt stuff with him. So,
Well, and that was when he was in South America. That's the whole Agent 666 book where he was working for British Petroleum and basically getting the oil in the hands of the oligarchs.
right. And once you understand this book, it's no longer a matter of theory anymore. All you have to do is start tracing these names back that they give you in the book to all of these different industries, right? Because the dedication page alone, you'll find all these different links and all the rest of the stuff. It really is a Rosetta Stone of understanding early century connections through the, Illuminati.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why Cooper was so into it. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about Beverly Hall first.
Yeah, go
what
ahead.
do you know about Pascal Beverly Randolph, the guy who founded Beverly Hall in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I'm not aware of him that much. I just know that's who it was that was behind founding it. But they talk about Beverly Hall in regard to building this Temple of Osiris for the new initiates, that they planted these special roses of the Rosy Cross like 5 years ahead of time so they could be able to harvest them specifically for this convocation. So there's a lot of preparation leading up within the Rosicrucians to making this whole thing happen.
Right. And that is important because it shows you not only that these people are deeply into ritual, but they're also carrying these rituals out right in front of everybody's faces, and nobody really bats an eye. But Pascal Beverly Randolph, October 1825 to July 29, 1875, was an American medical doctor, occultist, spiritualist, trance medium, and writer. He is notable as perhaps the first person to introduce the principles of erotic alchemy to North America. And according to A.E. Waite, published the earliest known Rosicrucian order within the United States. So this guy, Pascal Beverly Randolph, is the founder of this little, order in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. He grew up in New York City and was baptized at the Church of the Transfiguration, Episcopal Manhattan. He was a free black man, also very interesting to know. And is a descendant of William Randolph. His father was the nephew of John Randolph of Roanoke, and his mother was Flora Beverly, whom he later described as being mixed English, French, German, Native American, and African ancestry. So when you're talking about bloodlines, you have to think is this what the American bloodlines ended up looking like? Because a lot of his ancestry really did go back to old world Europe as well.
Right.
As a teen and young man, Randolph traveled widely due to his work abroad sailing vessels. He journeyed to England, through Europe and Far East and Persia, where his interest in mysticism and the occult led him to study with local practitioners of folk magic and various religions. Now, to me, this is sounding a lot like the life of Aleister Crowley, right? He's an early sort of Crowley template.
Well, and you also have one of the Rothschilds that was going around doing. There was a lot of these younger elite jet setters that had their yachts, and they were just going around the world, getting into these various occult kind of things that were also linked in with the OSS as well.
Exactly. After leaving the sea, Randolph embarked on his public career as a lecturer and writer. By his mid-20s, he regularly appeared on stage as a trance medium and advertised his services as a spiritual practitioner in magazines associated with spiritualism. Like many spiritualists of his era, he lectured on the favor of abolition of slavery. After emancipation, he taught literacy to free slaves in New Orleans. In addition to his work as a trance medium, Randolph trained as a doctor of medicine and wrote and published both fictional and instructive books on his theories of health, sexuality, spiritualism, and occultism. He wrote more than 50 works on magic and medicine and established an independent publishing company and was an avid promoter of birth control. This goes into the Birth Control League and why we had people like, what's her name?
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
You know who I'm talking about. She's the big promoter of abortion and birth control. She was part of the Birth Control League.
It's not Ayn Rand.
She founded Planned Parenthood.
Planned Parenthood, yeah. Sanger.
Margaret Sanger.
Yeah.
So Margaret Sanger was also a Rosicrucian. And her handler, the guy who managed her and put her in different places to speak with different people, he was actually managing other women. They had about 5 other women, one for every continent, that was pushing the ideas of birth control on all these different continents as well. So through this Rosicrucian order, you get the spread of birth control and abortion being spread over the entire world. You had one in Japan, you had one in China, you had all these different women that were now pushing birth control from the Beverly Randolph.
Coming out of Rosicrucian philosophy. And I think this is also about the same time you had Kellogg's with his making of the early cereals to decrease the libido.
Oh, that guy was all about not having sex.
Right.
That guy circumcised himself with no painkillers to make sure he didn't have sex with his wife.
This is the guy that started Kellogg's.
Yes. And then when it wasn't doing so well, his brother took it and he put sugar on it and sold it to the public. But they had these health camps where people would come and basically, and it was also tied into, I think, a series of orphanages. And they were basically feeding them this stuff. And they put, saltpeter in it as well to basically make it so that there was zero libido in the males.
Yeah, they did some weird stuff over it. I forgot they took over some place and turned it into like some
somewhere in New York.
You know, the niece of the Kellogg's family ties into the Ranchia cult.
No.
The Ranchia book. So weird. His niece and her husband found the book or got the book from their next door neighbor, but they never tell you who it was.
Yeah.
They're the ones who ended up with the Ranchia book that ended up starting the cult.
Well, that whole Urantia book, it was upstate New York. It was a couple eccentrics, and they were actually doing spiritual channeling, and they wrote that. And the first half of the book is basically talks about how this universe came into being, and then the second half is all about the adventures of Jesus around the world and all the other countries. And it's like twice as thick as the Old and New Testament put together. It's a good book. I've read it.
Well, that is the interesting angle, is that all of this stuff is being informed by the spiritualism of that time period. It says, having long used the pseudonym, the Rosicrucian, for his spiritualist and occult writings, Randolph eventually founded the Fraternitatis Rosicrucians in 1858 and their first lodge in San Francisco in 1861, the oldest Rosicrucian organization. So we're talking about AMORC now.
Right.
So this is the West Coast form of it.
Yeah.
This group, still in existence today, avoids mention of Randolph's interest in sex magic, but his magico-sexual theories and techniques form the basis of much of the teachings of another cult fraternity, the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor, though it is not clear that Randolph himself was ever personally associated with it. He described himself mostly as a Rosicrucian, largely alone, producing his own synthesis of esoteric teachings. The manner in which Randolph incorporated sex into his occult system was considered uncharacteristically bold for the period in which he lived. He believed that sex magic could lead to increased health, love, empowerment of women and the children of superior intelligence. In his more underground publications, he wrote that church and marriage were oppressive forces that should be overthrown with the power of love and worldwide revolution. Full on socialism.
And that the whole idea of world revolution, getting into going back to the Dionysiacs, coming forward to the various revolutions, from France to America to the Bolsheviks to all being subvertly funded by Duke de St. Louis, Wall Street, various banking classes. Yeah.
He wrote that I believe in love all the way through, and while I live, I will help every man, woman, and the betweenities to win, obtain, intensify, deepen, and purify, strengthen. And so he was one of the first ones to be advocating this fluid use of gender. It wasn't just in Germany.
Oh, no. But in all of this within the esoteric function, it all flows back to the sacred androgyne.
Right.
And,
he didn't found Rosicrucianism in Pennsylvania. He did it publicly. I believe Rosicrucianism in Pennsylvania goes all the way back to a guy named Johannes Kelpius. And Johannes Kelpius lived from 1667 to 1708, and he was a German priest, mystic, musician, and writer. He was also interested in the occult, botany, and astronomy, and came to believe with his followers, called the Society of the Woman in the Wilderness, that the end of the world would occur in 1694. This belief is based on an elaborate interpretations of Revelations 12:6 in anticipation of the advent of a heavenly kingdom somewhere in the wilderness during that year. Kelpius felt that 17th century province of Pennsylvania, given its reputation for religious toleration at the edge of a barely settled wilderness, had been the best place to be. Philadelphia had been founded in 1682, but the city and province of Pennsylvania had quickly become a tolerant haven and refuge for many pietist, communitarian, or free-thinking groups. So this little group in the Wissahickon were basically practicing Rosicrucians who didn't want to let everybody else know that they were into that sort of thing. So
right.
Johannes Kelpius, go ahead.
That kind of ties into the whole millenarian kind of cults, where there was this whole series of cults in the Northeast that thought that the world was coming to an end based on these various equations they did around revelations.
The town outside of Yale is all based around their interpretation of Revelations and how they should set up the town. So this alien-looking dude right here, Johannes Kelpius, that's the first portrait ever drawn in the United States, they say.
Oh, and really?
He's got his fingers to his temple as if he's like transmitting something with his mind, and he clearly looks like a gray alien, which is just weird. So this Kelpius guy is in this gorge or this ditch outside of Pennsylvania, and he's living in kind of a cave. They call it the Cave of Kelpius. And right now they have the I Am cult right outside of this gorge. I don't know if you guys have followed that one, but the I Am cult is like the very first UFO cult in the United States. And they promoted all this stuff that you hear repeated over and over again by UFO cults about the Galactic Federation and all the rest of this stuff. And
Right.
they believe their savior is this guy who never dies. What's his name? Baron something. Supposed to be this big alchemist who lived forever.
Zazzoni.
No, after that.
Nicholas Flamel.
No. He's European, and is it Baron? It's not Baron. I forget his title, but he would just be seen over and over again in different places, and they would assume that it was the same guy.
Yeah, that's kind of the Zazzoni story.
Right.
Well, he was one of the first oil portraits in the 13 British colonies. Wow.
Yeah.
So this Kelpius was really influential in forming the religious beliefs in Pennsylvania at that time, because, like they said, he was there before the founding of Philadelphia, and he's setting up. What he would do is he would do music healing. So people would come into his cave and he would heal them with music.
Resonance frequency.
Right. So he's doing something really kind of special back then, but it does transfer over. He's teaching other people. He died at 40 years old on his birthday. And there's something about this 40 number that really has a large deal to play with revelations and how they believed that they would be, resurrected or brought up into heaven. The 40th parallel, all the rest of these different 40s, 40 days in the wilderness, all the rest of this stuff has to do with their kind of eschatology around this. Well, in the 1700s, the core Rosicrucian group actually moved out and started their own abbey. And at that abbey, they were able to funnel money from France to George Washington during the Revolution. So the Rosicrucians in America were pivotal in, transforming how Americans fought that war. Right. And they were, kind of the money movers for France and the rest of these European forces that, wanted to defeat the British.
Well, and you were saying about, as far as this whole idea of death and resurrection, the last chapter in the 60th Convocation is called The Sons of Osiris. And it's all about the idea of dying and resurrecting and this whole reincarnation process and leveling yourself up to the point of becoming a Christ or a Christ and ascending. So, yeah.
Right. And I think that's sort of been the whole draw with all these different secret societies all around America, is that they're all promising this form of ascendancy, and they have to kind of keep quiet their techniques and how they do it. But I think that there is an unbroken line of oral history that goes back to the time of Atlantis that they're trying to keep secret. That's what they really kind of esotericize the most.
But it says in the preface of that they even given hints, though.
Right.
Which every single time you see something on TV, one of these big events like the Super Bowl, there's always a bunch of different stuff in the Super Bowl. Why is there an Eye of Horus or pyramids or all these all sorts of symbolism? Nobody really thinks twice about it. I mean, Katy Perry's Dark Horse. Yeah, that whole music video is just all symbolism.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's the thing. I think that we've come to the point that we're so barraged and so there's just so many images hitting us so often that, a lot of these symbols, are just passé at this point.
Right. I mean, it's all sort of absorbed back into the subconscious mind. I think that's what the whole point of these different fraternities and mystery schools was, to try and wake up the symbols that had been laying dormant in your subconscious mind for so long.
Right.
And I think that's really what they're going for when it comes to initiation. But that's not really what they're telling you. And I think it's funny that they talk about this pyramid of fire on the Yucatan Peninsula, because they already explored that whole Yucatan Peninsula and they knew what was down there. But that's not where they do their pyramid of fire rituals. They do those pyramid of fire rituals over at Teotihuacan.
Right.
And, for the, secret societies to be celebrating there instead of at the Yucatan, like they say in this book, indicates to me that they don't really have possession of this pyramid of fire. I think it's not in their reach. Well, in 2015, there was a scuba expedition off the coast of Cuba, really close to the Yucatan. It's like between the Yucatan and Cuba.
Right.
And they found a pyramid 2,000 meters below the water's surface.
Right.
And I think that might be what they're referring to in that section, is that they're talking about a pyramid that has been inundated with water for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Which is nuts. If that's
well, and that would have to be at the point when the ice age was still going on, before the glaciers had broken loose and basically, flooded everything. And the big, like Randolph Carlson talks about, all the miscellaneous life getting washed down through the green. And, I've seen there's archaeological studies of mastodons and different giant like saber-toothed tigers and stuff in America. But yeah, and so a lot of this, and also in South America, you've got roads that they've established that just run right off into the ocean in various directions. And it's just a mystery. But obviously this was before things became flooded.
Right. So I think, you can actually learn a lot about where you can find the real keys to understanding our deep history in this book as well, which is, that's amazing to me. So one of the sections that really stood out, if we can go back to that book and look this up, is the V word. I don't know if I want to say it because, YouTube.
Yeah, I know.
It's the injectable crucifix.
Yeah.
I kind of like that one.
But they basically talk about the idea that you want to keep, this whole thing is about purifying the body, keeping the body clean, eating good food, so that you can become into that state where you become elevated, so that you can raise your consciousness through your reincarnations to the point of ascending. So in order to keep your body clean, you don't want to put any foreign substances in it.
Right. So these are the world's biggest injectable crucifix pushers, and they're telling their internal membership not to take them.
Right.
What does that tell you about that product?
What part of the book is that in?
If you go to the little search tab and look up the V word, you'll have it pop right up for you. But yeah, so this book is really spilling the tea, compared to a lot of other, conspiracy literature. This has way more confirmation.
And just the fact that it directly straight out says, what we're showing you here in regard to the information and the seal, the obverse of the seal, the pyramid with the eye, is the tenets of the Illuminati. And this is a point that, this is 1910. So we're only looking at, 1776 was when the Bavarian Illuminati founded, and they had to go underground, and they kind of precipitated out into all these miscellaneous world revolutions. So it's kind of something that's in the vernacular of this time.
Absolutely is. And if I were to, conjecture as to what they were trying to do, these are the people who have the most contact with the outside society. This is not the parallel organization that they have. This is the one that's trying to program the next bureaucrats. These are the ones who are going to be going into government and carrying out these policies.
To anybody that wants to look it up on their own, it's on page 150 of the file, and it's page 143 of the actual book itself.
Yeah. But it's just interesting in regard to, we have the idea of Illuminati teachings shaping the masses. We have the ideas of globalism. We have the ideas of medical philanthropy. We have all these things going on in union in this book.
Right. And it's the beginning of the New Age movement too.
Right.
And they're the ones sort of admitting that they're behind that. You can see all the same themes popping up again and again in the New Age movement through these organizations. So, they had a major impact in 1916. And again, this is just 2 years before America gets into World War One.
Right.
So there's a lot of international people and a lot of international influences, and they're getting ready to foist the modern world on all the rest of us.
Right.
All the old traditions to go.
Go ahead, Nick.
I didn't say anything.
No, you look like you're about to say something. But at this time, it was kind of a popular kind of craze for the bourgeoisie to go and get involved in the Rosicrucians, the Knights Templar. You have Albert Pike with the 33-degree system that's basically, in a lot of cases just selling degrees. But yeah, it's so the people that are involved in these things are the upper echelon of, and the upper middle class and the elite.
Right. So that brings us to AMORC, that first organization that Pascal Beverly Randolph started is still around to this day, and you can join AMORC. They'll send you Rosicrucianism by the mail.
I have a binder of AMORC Rosicrucian, and it's each one's like 3 or 4 pages of a little lecture about the spirit of man, the reincarnation, the soul. So it's kind of self-help material is what it really kind of is, but with a certain propaganda slant on it, because they're constantly saying, God forbid the person who tries to achieve this on their own. They need the leader. They need the people that are going to be able to guide them. Otherwise, they're going to end up in the ditch. So they're basically saying, join the cult, join the cult, join the,
Right. That's the big drumbeat. Now, I guarantee you in all that literature, they didn't tell you about Pascal Beverly Randolph and his whole sex magic thing, because back then it was a big no-no to talk about sex magic. And he was beloved by the elites, but if his stuff had made it out too far to the rest of the society, he could have probably expected a, pitchfork and torch welcome home.
Right.
But that connection there between Pascal Beverly Randolph and all of this Rosicrucianism going all the way back into the 1600s is pretty strong. And I heard a lot of that on Mike Wan's show, Your Handbook for the Apocalypse. And he goes into the deep history in Pennsylvania and the connection to all of these different Rosicrucian organizations and everything else. So if you got the time, go back over his library, because all the stuff about his visit to the Wissahickon Gorge and seeing the woman in the wilderness sort of plaques out there, and then going to see the I Am cult. They actually invited Mike Wan and his whole group inside, and he's got the whole thing on tape. So you can kind of really understand that this stuff is still around. It's still it's still relevant. It still adds an undercurrent to today's society.
I think in a lot of ways there's a resurgence in a lot of this stuff going on with the New Age movement and all the stuff, since basically the 60s counterculture,
I couldn't agree more. I think people are really searching for answers in times like this, but what they're not willing to do is they're not willing to cross-reference. So cross-reference is the lost art in today's society. What you have to do is you have to get a book like the 68th Convocation out, and then you have to just start cross-referencing as wide as possible with these people that you see in that book and what they went on to do in government, because that's where you're going to find where the rubber meets the road. And having those cross-references, a guide like this on doing that is a great way to do it. I mean, I'd love to get JJ into this too, because he's so good at finding all these different lineages and everything else. I guarantee you there are major crossovers between Beverly Hall and the Society of the Cincinnati. And all through the same kind of belief systems, all through Pennsylvania. You've got these mounds that are all over the place. And at Beverly Hall, they actually built 3 pyramids. So there's 3 pyramids on the site, and it's I think those are for some of the people who were buried there. So it's very much still in practice. If you go to soul.org, they're the ones who bought that website first.
Throw
a picture
Pascal up there. This is Pascal, the guy that started it. Let's see. There he is. Yeah, he kind of looks like a early American out of like Gunsmoke or any classic Western, kind of Deadwood or something.
Right. But this guy is actually starting to reemerge as sort of like a hero figure on the left.
Hmm.
It used to be a much bigger like ecosystem of conspiracy theory on the left, where they would have, you know, their own sort of pantheon. He was definitely in one of these hero categories because of the work he did and the time that he lived it. And but you dig a little bit deeper and it starts to get pretty dark.
What was that website you said?
Soul, SOUL .org. That's their current home. And it's funny because it's like there's a huge, you know, line of history that a lot of people don't get into, but you know, they talk all about this stuff here.
Mm-hmm.
That's their layman, right? Try. You can see that on the front of the book.
Yep.
So there is a major continuity. And again, Amort gets all of the attention, but this is really the home of Rosicrucianism in America. It's not out in California.
Being the most long-standing.
Now, they do have a pretty fantastic museum out at the Amort headquarters in California. I believe you had something about that, Nick?
Say that again, Amort?
Yeah, the Amort Museum. They had a bunch of artifacts from Egypt and all sorts of stuff out there, right?
Somebody else, I think, had maybe gone on about that. I'm not, or maybe I brought it up and I don't even remember. But yeah, I know with Amorg, I just know it's kind of like a mail order secret society. But I do think they might actually own artifacts, like they have put them up. I do remember someone recently mentioning that. I don't think that was me.
And what I also find interesting is when you go back and you look in some of the early comic books, some of the early sci-fi rags, as you're going through there's advertisements, you know, like learn the secrets of the ancients and join the Rosicrucians. And like, you know, that it was a common thing that you would see in a lot of these kind of pulp kind of productions.
I got some pictures. So this would be the outside of the Amorc temple there. As you can see, they've got all the carvings and stuff. They have a whole Egyptian museum.
Like a bunch of sphinxes.
Right. Artifacts, all sorts of crazy stuff. So, and again, what they're trying to say is that they are the unbroken line going back to Egypt.
Right.
They say it's a Karnak style entrance there. Look at that.
Mm-hmm. But it's also interesting because, I mean, you go back into the 1600s and the 1700s, and there was a constant like regurgitation of the Reformation of the Rosy Cross, the Reformation of the Knights, and they're all claiming, you know, lineage back to these original powers that be, and you know, it's hard to say whether that's true or not.
Right, but I think what it really comes down to for them is decoding some of the mysteries.
Oh,
you know, they feel like they have a direct line if they've unraveled some of the mysteries themselves. So the address is actually 1660 Park Avenue.
Yep. Always.
But it shouldn't be any surprise that they're able to keep this kind of stuff quiet because, you know, how many years did it take before you guys ever heard of the American Stonehenge down there in Elberton County, Georgia?
Oh, I remember I was on that early on, you know, and it's what is it? CR. It was signed by CR, Christian Rosenkreuz, you know, and then they finally tore it down. A couple of years back.
right? Somebody lit off a bomb.
Yeah.
So this is the 10 Commandments of the New World Order. And what was the name of it again?
The
Georgia Guidestones.
Georgia Guidestones.
Georgia
Yeah.
Guidestones, right. So again, this goes right back into the Rosicrucian history
Right.
here. Because
Right.
we're saying Christian Rosicruits, and I guess since the 1300s or 1200s, the mainstream interpretation of anything having to do with Rosicrucianism is that it's all a hoax. Every bit of it, all the way through to the Georgia Guidestones. But I think what we've pretty much conclusively done in this episode is prove that there are organizations calling themselves the Rosicrucians with a very, very long history and a lot of influence.
Seeking to manipulate.
Right. Was it really that hard, mainstream media? Was it really that hard?
Did somebody knock it down with a backhoe?
After the bomb went off, I think they went in with the backhoe and knocked it over.
Right. They never caught the bomber.
They never said who did it.
No.
It's just gone now.
And they never said who built it. And the farmer, he just leased the land to him. They can. And when you look at that thing, the way that it's tuned, it's like each of the stones is tuned to certain chords, and then there's certain holes in it that give you certain star alignments, and then it's got all the miscellaneous information on it about controlling the world population, etc., etc.
In different languages.
In different languages.
Rosetta Stone. When you spell things out in a bunch of different languages,
yes,
the symbol that you're sending is that you want this thing to last forever. So that anybody who speaks any of these languages can read it.
Right.
Why would they blow that up? Because they still haven't caught the guy. I mean, it wouldn't be that hard. You got his license plate and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's the whole thing. I mean, if they were to rebuild it, they would have to go and retune those. They would have to remake the thing, basically, because it was made in accordance with certain sacred specifications.
And I think it had a lot to do with the fact that there was a pretty significant, what do you call those things? Time capsule.
Yeah.
At the site. And so I think what they were trying to avoid is having somebody get in there and actually get to the time capsule before anybody else can.
Right.
And that kind of, that tips me off, because where else are you going to store this kind of information?
Right.
You kind of do it out in the public. So maybe they were just retrieving that time capsule that had something important in it. I know that when they took apart the Robert E. Lee statue, there was a time capsule in that. And one of the things that stood out to me in the opening of this time capsule was that they found a postcard about the Knights Templar inside of it, from the Knights Templar. So what are they doing with Robert E. Lee during that time period? Well, the researcher who was pulling it apart, you can hear her say, "Oh no," as she's pulling it apart in front of the camera, because they don't want to touch this stuff. They're not interested in real history. All they want to do is say, what the pottery looks like. There's the pottery.
Right.
You don't have to make any conclusions. Go ahead.
Yeah, the Georgia Guidestones were in Arabic, Chinese, English, Hebrew, Hindi, Russian, Spanish, and Swahili. Number 1, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Guide reproductive wisely. That's number 2. Guide reproduction wisely. Improve fitness and diversity. They don't really promote that. Number 3, unite humanity with a living new language. Number 4,
like Babel.
Yeah. 4, rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. Number 5, protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. Number 6, let all nations rule, internally resolving external disputes in a world court. Number 7, avoid petty laws and useless officials. Number 8, balance personal rights with social duties. Number 9, prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. Number 10, be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature.
And as far as that world language, they've actually got, they call it business English, that they reduced down to 22 characters, I think, that they are actually trying to push off on every nation as a standard to be able to communicate for commercial aspects. So, a lot of these things, they're already in act. And when you get into the book, the 68th Convocation, it specifically talks about the reverse side of the seal not being cut until this globalism happens and we reabsorb Mexico. And that's at the same point they're going to put gold caps on the pyramids in Egypt when they cut the seal as well. So there's this striving for this Illuminati New World Order, basically.
Absolutely. You could take the 68th Convocation and put all of those points that are made on those stones right on top of each other.
Oh yeah,
it's the same group.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about that. So Bill Cooper is vindicated yet again. He found this. He said, this is the thing that breaks the whole New World Order wide open. Obviously it does. The problem is, how do we get it out to people? How do they start to understand this? How do they research it for themselves if we're not talking about it? I think this is one of those big keys that people just aren't talking about.
Yeah, and especially when it's portrayed in the light of the more recent Rosicrucian style documentation, where it's kind of really it appears to be almost a self-help book,
right?
Because it's telling you, how to do better, how to act better, how to eat better, how to and over and over they say save your mortal soul,
Right.
But it's only for people that are involved.
Yeah, it's out there for the public now, but at the time it was for the attendees of the convocation. Yeah.
Right. So I don't think this was ever intended for the public. And that is one of the reasons why people should read it. But if you look at the constant drama going on in Washington, D.C., and you're wondering which direction we're going, and nobody's paying any attention to Mexico right now.
Right.
Especially, look, they've got Gloria Sheinbaum. I believe that's the president of Mexico's name now.
Yep.
And she's fully on board with the global agenda. So maybe we're seeing a misdirection right now where Trump is making all these overt gestures to Canada while the real interest is in absorbing Mexico. And that's what nobody will see coming.
Right. And they've been talking about this for quite some time, as far as the North American Union and basically merging Mexico, the United States, and Canada into this, because it's the whole idea of the 7 global regions, with the global governance, and you can go back to all the miscellaneous UN documents coming up through the all the United Nations, and this has been stuff that's been projected for quite some time.
I remember him talking about starting the Amero, replacing the dollar with the Amero.
Right.
I used to live on the I-35 corridor. They used to have the idea that they were going to make one continuous corridor from Canada all the way to Mexico.
Right.
And that whole I-35 thing was going to be expanded out to, a massive size. Like this would be the first transcontinental highway that would just completely bypass America. And this was one of the big things that Alex Jones was in on first, was trying to stop that North American highway. And now he could care less about any of this stuff. Right. He's moved on. Who cares about globalism anymore? We got Trump.
Yeah, I don't know. Over the years, I just think Alex Jones is so co-opted. But yeah, anyway.
I think that's pretty clear. But we got to raise that awareness again, because I think a lot of what we're seeing with immigration goes into Rex 84. And when you're thinking about Rex 84, you need to understand that there were multiple operations going on, one of which was a training exercise where they were projecting what it would be like to have millions of refugees coming across the border into the United States. And so what they determined is that if they spark some kind of a civil war, they can get millions of immigrants coming across the southern border, and then they can have total martial law in the United States, trying to sort out who's an immigrant and who's a native.
Right.
So the whole idea there would be to establish martial law to deal with the immigration crisis. Well, we keep seeing these Q-tards all the time. They keep saying, hey, we need martial law now. We need martial law
Oh,
now,
I know.
along with that Rex 84 agenda.
Yeah. Well, and when you go back into Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski, and they specifically talk about using immigrants as soft weapons, and then you look at the fact that we just opened up the border, and how that generally occurs I mean, I think luckily just the United States is the size that it is, that it has less of and the fact that we are such a multicultural nation as well,
Absolutely. It kind of goes back to those images that were in the Denver airport, right?
Yep.
So where you've got that big dude with the sword sort of cutting down all these children. And it's almost like there's a consistent memory here. There's a consistent motif between all of these different places that goes along with the colors they use, the type of language they use.
Yep.
It's almost like it's all encoded in some kind of a spell.
So now the Denver airport with that image specifically, it represents a Bible verse where they talk about turning the weapons of war into plowshares to feed the nations. But then there's also another Bible verse that talks about melting down the plowshares and having to turn them into weapons. So there's kind of the cyclical aspect of this imagery that they're portraying.
Right. But you can definitely get that kind of cargo culty vibe through all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, big ups to Operation GCD. He says these people are nothing but ancient alien cargo cultists. And if you look at the language that they use and the kind of brainwashing and everything else, you got to conclude that it is kind of a cult, and they're looking for whatever it is that happened so many years in the past.
Right. And they're constantly wanting you to join the cult as well.
Yeah.
in different ways. Like they've got it mapped out enough to where they feel like they can pacify the whole human race just by understanding the personality types and what they can get into. And you look at operations where they're pushing out books like the Catcher in the Rye. I was listening to William Ramsey Investigates, and he was doing a great series on that. But once you get the language of the Catcher in the Rye, and you understand how they're using that language, you can kind of put on the sunglasses and see behind every piece of propaganda that's out there. You can kind of read exactly what they want you to do in a subtext form.
Yeah. And that the whole Catcher in the Rye, I've seen different representation, like people interpreting it differently in regard to, it goes back to an old Scottish poem about catching a little girl in the rye and taking advantage of her. But within the book itself, it has the various initiatory steps of a mystery school or a Masonic, initiation, laid out within the text itself.
But as Ramsey always says, this guy, Holden Caulfield, is not a hero, not any stretch of the imagination. Like, he's the bad guy in his own head and in reality. But that's what makes it kind of compelling, is the fact that he is so, disconnected from the world around him.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's what they're trying to get young men to turn into.
Yeah. Because through the whole book, he's saying, I am a people killer. I am, and he's like repeating that over and over and over. And it's like there's this whole subcontext of the book.
And it's a psychic driving. That's what Ramsey calls it. So you've got, saying I'm a madman over and over again, the people killing hat. And so you see these assassins holding that book. And once you can read it with that critical eye, like Ramsey teaches, you don't unsee it. And you can start to see it in a lot of other forms of propaganda out there. Right. But, reading books like this and watching Ramsey's videos on stuff like that, once you put the two together, you can start to really get a feel for how this place is actually working. because everything we're told about how it actually works is total bullshit.
Yeah.
How many different groups are involved in the making of this book?
Well, you have the Rosy Cross, the Rosicrucians, you have the Freemasons, you have the Illuminati. There's a huge underlying theosophy or Hindu kind of jargon going on within it. I would say there's definitely some theosophy aspects,
But they
to
consider
this as well.
themselves Christians.
They do come off as a Christian Rosencreutz, so it's a Christian science, which then they constantly are talking about Christian science in here, which ties back to Rudolf Steiner as well. So
Okay, so it says, given a resume of the proceedings of the convocation, together with most lectures were delivered during the time of the convocation by several delegates present. Also, a report of the work of the ancient initiation in the Grove of Osiris as especially prepared for the occasion. So it says the roll call of honor. Now I could read off all these names, but I'm looking for the all the groups because there were a lot of them. It says the articles do not give the inner work of the Rose Cross Order, simply the outer public teachings.
right.
The Illuminati and its soul science work may be called the child of the Rose Cross Order. So they're saying that they were the ones who gave birth to the Illuminati.
Yeah. So here's one of the notes I have from the book. It says, all students of the ancient mysteries and religions know that in the Temple of Solomon, there were 3 courts. The outer court for the people being composed of 700 selected teachers and leaders. These were the members of the first degree Illuminati, also called the seekers or the travelers or the soldiers. So,
Absolutely. So, I mean, what they're saying right there is that their entire conception of humanity is based off the Solomon's Temple idea.
right.
And so you have the outer initiates, and what they're trying to do to us with all of these rituals and games and all the rest of that stuff is get us into that outer court of initiates so that they can predict our future outcomes.
Right. And it says the middle court or members of the second degree were 70 in number and were supposed to be in the hall of meditation and acted as mediators between the people and the inner sanctuary. Above all was the inner court or the circle of the 7 priests and the masters or high priests, who were the teachers between God and man, mediators between the seen and the unseen.
Right. So these would be the bureaucrats, the
Right.
bureaucratic class. And as you've been inducted into the bureaucratic class, now you are supposed to instruct everybody else how they are supposed to live. Now, this is the bureaucratic revolution that's taking place. This is in the high point of the progressive era, right? And so the progressive era didn't really stop until, late in the 1930s, really.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole idea is that they can make man better by using this bureaucratic revolution. And that was a big theme with the who's the guy on the dime?
Abraham Lincoln?
Woodrow Wilson.
Oh, is Wilson on? Yeah, okay.
So Woodrow Wilson was elected in, what was it, 1910 and then again in 1914.
Mm-hmm.
So he's on his second term right now, and he is looking to try and put us in World War II, right? And his whole goal was the bureaucratic revolution, where instead of having elected representatives, you would have a constant bureaucracy or the deep state. So his goal, and William Mendel House,
I was going to say Mendel House. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Mendel House was writing some really wicked fiction about how to implement. I forgot the name of his book, but it was just
it's called something administrator.
Right. There was some guy's name, administrator.
Wendell House.
Something Drew administrator.
Yeah. Something Drew. You're right. But now Mendel House was all tied in with Cecil Rhodes and all tied in with Balfour. And so you have all that kind of going on in regard to setting up the state of Israel as well.
Absolutely.
You know,
Having that proxy in Israel, they felt like you can make the most social changes with a war. Second most way of making these social changes is by doing it from a top-down level, and you've got to have a proxy so that you can use them as sort of the intermediaries. Again, back to this threefold system.
Yep.
Everybody else is in the outer courtyard of American foreign policy, but it's only certain people from a certain group that are allowed to be on the inner layer of that,
Right.
decision-making process.
Well, in Solomon's temple itself, you had the inner court, which was for the rabbis and the Holy of Holies, and then you had the exterior court, which was considered the golden court, which was for the Jewish people that were coming to sacrifice, basically. And then you had what they called the silver court on the outside of that, which was for the Gentile that was coming to sacrifice. So you have these layers of separation societally.
Now, are you describing Solomon's temple or government?
No, Solomon's. Yeah, exactly. But that was how Solomon's temple was set up.
Right, but what do they call themselves? They call themselves the round table groups.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same idea every time.
Oh, yeah.
These different round tables are how they manage the world, and you're describing the same thing in Solomon's
So now
temple.
and those roundtable groups come from Cecil Rhodes, who set up the apartheid in South Africa. And Craig and I have been looking into
John Hammond.
John Hayes
Hammond.
Yeah.
Him and John Hayes Hammond Jr. So John Hayes Sr. was he was a gold miner, and he ended up going to work for Cecil Rhodes in Africa. And he was pretty much his right-hand man.
He set up the De Beers diamond mines so the De Beers could make that money.
You guys want to see the shortest Wikipedia article of all time?
Sure.
You like that. Round table movement.
Yeah. But now it was within Cecil Rhodes, basically in South Africa with the diamond mines, that on his last will and testament, he actually had like, I think 5 or 6 of these wills where he had instructions to set up a secret society that consisted of the Milner kindergarten groups that would form the roundtable groups that became the Council of Foreign Relations, that once Jimmy Carter got put into place through Brzezinski, they brought all these Council of Foreign Relation people into the American government. And since Jimmy Carter, almost every single cabinet position has been filled by one of these CFR members.
Yep. So the history of the Round Table movement goes right to Cecil Rhodes and his different will and testaments.
Yes.
And he had 17 different versions of it before it was fully published. That's amazing. That's the entire plan for what this New World Order then became. And it was all stuff of this occultism.
Right. And the most specific part about those roundtable groups and the Council of Foreign Relations and the Rhodes scholars that we have in various media sources and in other places. I mean, Bill Clinton was a Rhodes scholar. But the whole idea of these groups, these roundtable groups and the Council of Foreign Relations, was to bring America back under the wing of the British government. And
John Hammond was against that.
Yeah, and he actually told Cecil Rhodes, if anything, America is going to assimilate Britain instead of Britain assimilating America.
Yeah. And
Cecil Rhodes didn't like that at all.
But you look at what happened, and you kind of have to look at Hammond's perspective, because I think that's what happened. I mean,
yeah,
it used to be that people were geniuses. Now it seems like the politicians all over the world, all of their IQ has fallen by at least 50 points.
Willing dupes put in place by lobbyists, outfits linked in with roundtable groups.
Well, you're seeing the destruction of the middle class, where more and more people own less and less. But these politicians that are in there that are getting paid hundreds of $1,000s a year, they're all worth tens of millions of dollars. So they're really probably just setting up themselves and their own families for the future of what's coming.
for the breakaway society that they see coming.
So they'll be like the lords in this neo-feudal system.
Right. Well, and that was during the French Revolution. The Duc de Saint Louis, he was initiated into the first degree of the Illuminati, and he was basically spending. He had millions of ducats, and he would just go around France filling up everybody's pocket so that they would be an agitator. And he spent more than 3/4 of his fortune before the French Revolution kicked off. Because he wanted to end up being a lord or some sort of a high-ranking, ruler after the vacuum happened.
Right. And, it can't be said enough. These red hats might be part of kind of a neo-feudal revolution.
Mm.
I mean, the red hats of the French Revolution, the red hats, the Trump Revolution, it could be ushering in that new kind of feudalism that we see, be exemplified in Peter Thiel and all the rest of these things.
Well, in that red hat, it's the Phrygian red hat, and it actually goes back to Attis and Mother Cybele, and Attis wore that red hat. But the whole thing, it's you follow that through the Dionysiacs, or the Dionysus worshippers coming into Greece that overthrew the system in Greece. And we talked about Robeson, who wrote Proofs of a Conspiracy about the Bavarian Illuminati, that basically he postulates that the Dionysiacs were very much along the lines of the modern Masonic orders and the Illuminati, basically seeding these ideas of world revolution and overthrow, and back to the Communist Manifesto.
Every single one.
Yeah,
it's fire in the minds of men. That's a
exactly. And it was Lord Rothschilds that actually paid Karl Marx to write the Communist Manifesto. So when you start looking at the banking class, marrying in with the royal class, and trying to precipitate back to shaping society,
This is what I have a problem with, people calling these unelected rulers as elites, because they don't produce anything elite. Like that used to mean something.
Well,
what it produces garbage.
Right. It goes back to the whole idea of El, the God. And that's where you get the elect, the elite, all these different El words come from El, the ancient God.
The top, the pinnacle.
Exactly.
Right?
Top of the pyramid.
Right. And the idea of these people being anywhere near the top of the pyramid is almost laughable. I mean, again, I think what happened with the American takeover of this whole thing is they stopped looking for meritocracy and they started looking for manipulatability. Right. And those are generally stupid people. So when we see all of Europe scrabbling to try and come to the aid of Zelensky, that's because none of them see the opportunity in this. How many of them could profit from them, turning around and being a different type of leader, when everybody knows that they're full of shit? They're so programmed and they're so into being part of this sheepish herd that none of them can actually break away from it. It's that stupid. I mean, at the very least, you want some ambitious leaders. You don't want a bunch of sheep. Some of these people have to keep the water running, and none of them seem like they want to.
Well, but that's when you get into, Mendel House, the administrator, and the ideas of putting an administrative government over the elected government, where essentially these experts, like how they were saying during the pandemic, trust the experts. This expert class, it goes back to the ancient idea of the ruling philosopher caste of Plato, and it supersedes the will of the people in regard to it. But what's the case we just had that overrode the administrators and said that they could no longer make it was do you know what I'm talking about? There was a recent lawsuit that overrode that. So we're actually looking at legally coming back to the point where the elected government is more powerful than the administrative class,
than the bureaucracies.
Oh
yeah.
Wow. The blob, that's what it is. I mean, anywhere this bureaucracy goes, everything gets suffocated under it. I looked it up and it was called Philip Drew Administrator.
There you go.
It's all about I guess, concreting the plutocracy
Yes.
and using the administration of these different, administrative class, because
Right.
these people who are supposed to have children that then take over their roles in the administrative class. And that's supposed to permanently concrete the sort of caste-based society that they've been wanting to go for.
Right. So, and when we talk about this, this 68th convocation in regard to shaping the people to raise the nation state, bringing globalism, we can go back to Virgil once again and look at, him writing the Georgics and the foundation, like mythos for Rome itself, and basically, teaching people how to create society.
Right. Because they were making handbooks and playbooks for how to create society all the way back then.
Right.
I think what a lot of people don't realize is that most of the philosophy that you see in ancient Greece was actually a methodology, a plan on how to use it for, colonizing other places.
Right.
And I think a lot of that took root with Christianity. And they figured, hey, if this can be done with the Greek religion, why can't it be done with something else, something that we control?
Well, and you look at Plato as well, and he specifically talks about how to build a good society or how to break down a society, so all that is within Plato as far back as we can go,
And Plato is one of the ones who first talked about putting forward a monotheist philosophical God.
Right.
And I think that's really what took the root in the form of the Septuagint. Because it wasn't until the Septuagint that, God became a singular instead of this plural idea.
What you're talking about is the Chevron decision.
The Chevron. Yeah, it's the Chevron doctrine.
Chevron doctrine.
Yeah, that got overrode. So hopefully that will begin to cut back on the administrative class that we've been having to deal with that's been building up, since 1984. Of course.
Probably before that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, they were, that's the thing. All of this information, H.G. Wells with his open conspiracy, like all of this stuff, it's all out there if you take the time to go look for it and read about it. It's a long-standing plan that's been going on since Virgil. And basically the whole, Saturn reigns again and the whole prophecy of, Apollo coming to rule again,
Well, I think there were different camps because, as you know, Greece was never a single kind of ruling body, but they maintained their freedom. And tyrants were a big problem for people like Plato because he didn't like the unpredictability of it. But tyrants back then meant a popular contestant, right? So they didn't have a lot of democracies, but when they did, usually it was run by a tyrant because in those days, the people would get together and choose their own ruler. That ruler would then depose the king, and he would be a populist. This is where the idea of populism, democracy, and dictatorship all sort of come together.
Right.
And so it's within that populism, if well managed, you have an expanding empire. If you have a poorly managed populism, you get leftism, right? And that poorly planned society doesn't really go too well for anybody. But at the same time, when you've got these democratic reforms, you have to keep an eye on what they're going to put forward because I don't think you can actually get outside of that paradigm. I think it's been that way all the way since Greece because that's the nature of democracy itself.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to get away from that.
And people coming together to, pick their ruler. And that's kind of why the founding fathers chose a republic, being a democratically elected republic, so that it would move slower than a democracy. Because the democracies, you just see them overturning and falling because of the volatility of what they were. And the republic itself is a little more slow moving, but it also incorporates that democratic element within it.
But if we're going to really make the argument about the republic, we have to call the republic period from 1776 to 1783. Because in 1783, that's when the Society of Cincinnati took over. And it's been sort of that system ever since. So, when you look at the details of how they implement these different ideas, you never get what you're given in the documents. You never get the
Right.
democracy. You never get the republic.
Right.
But you always do have a ruling class, always do have a plutocracy. I think
Yeah.
the key is to understand that these people are not stone. Like they have to respond at some point.
So people that don't know, I never heard of the Society of Cincinnati. It's is the nation's oldest patriotic organization, founded in 1783 by officers of the Continental Army who served together in the American Revolution. Its mission is to promote knowledge and appreciation of the achievement of American independence and to foster fellowship among its members. Now a nonprofit educational organization devoted to the principles and ideas of its founders, the Modern Society maintains its headquarters, library, and museum at Anderson House in Washington, D.C.
Right.
So it's officially a museum, but the reality is that they only let the children of the Continental officers join it. And when you become president, if you're not already a member, you automatically get membership. So it's
Right.
an ancestral military junta.
Yep.
So the children of the officers are the only ones allowed to join, and they're the ones in charge of the executive office. So
But now the idea of the Cincinnatus is going back to the Roman Cincinnatus.
absolutely, and the idea with the Roman war chief as the symbol, I think, really should take precedent over the idea of him going back to the farm, because what they're trying to do is keep it within the military lineage.
Yeah.
And so by keeping them in that sort of Cincinnatus type, our officers come from the sons and daughters of other officers that come from the sons and daughters of these powerful families back in Europe. You really don't get away from the system.
Right.
The Society of the Cincinnati has over 4,400 members residing in the United States, France, and more than 25 other countries. The youngest hereditary members are in their 20s. The oldest are over 100. A few members, great-great-grandsons of the Proposity, are only 4 generations removed from the officers of the Revolutionary War. Some of the youngest members, great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandsons of their Proposity, are 9 generations removed. Some are direct descendants in an unbroken male line of members reaching back to the founding of the society. Many more have joined since the mid-19th century, when a change in the membership rules allowed for the representation of otherwise qualified Continental officers who, for whatever reason, never joined the society.
So the figure to keep in mind about the Society of the Cincinnati is this guy named Adanus Burke. And Adanus Burke was the one who wrote to George Washington to say that this is a really bad idea. He wrote this letter called On the Society of the Cincinnati. I haven't been able to translate it from his handwriting. I have found it in the National Archives. But what he's saying is that this is going to set up an ancestral military junta, and you shouldn't do this. I thought we were going to do something other than this. But he's the only guy who did this. Now, what they said after he sent his letter and distributed it is that, no, it's not just going to be these Continental officers. We're also going to include officers in the militia. So the militia can join up too. So Adanus Burke stopped making noise, and they immediately went back to only letting Continental officers join, because that was the whole point.
And interestingly, Cincinnati or Cincinnatus, Cincinnati, Ohio, when you're driving through there, there's a giant pyramid built right on the river. That is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I wish GCD JJ was in here, because he would be going off. He knows the most about the Society of the Cincinnati and has a lot of their lineages mapped out. So
nice.
This is the American Blue Blood Network. This is the original. And so if that's not paid attention to, it's only at your own detriment.
Yeah. Well, I think that was good. I think we covered a lot there.
Absolutely. But I think if you tell your friends about the this book, at least the serious researchers out there,
Yeah.
We got to get more eyes on this thing.
Mm.
Bill Cooper said it, decades ago, and
Yeah.
it hasn't gotten the kind of attention that it deserves. So if you're out there and you're a serious researcher, get into the 68th convocation. You can find it for free online and start tracking these people.
Yep. You can get it on archive, or you can get it on the Congress.lib. LIB.
It's only about 250 pages.
Yeah, it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
That's actually not bad at all.
Right.
Nice. Well, you guys want to drop your links?
Socials.
Sure. I'm Headless Giant. You can find me on X and on YouTube as well. If you have any sort of stories that have to do with the paranormal, the arcane, weird dreams, you can send them to me and we'll read them on air on either Wednesday or Thursday. My email address is headlessgiantpodcast@gmail.com.
And Nick, the Occult Rejects. So available on all major podcast hosts, BitChute, Rumble, and YouTube. Thank you.
And I'm R Marks or Robbie Marks, and you can find my link tree at Linktree RMARX, and that'll pull up all my stuff, my podcast, my website, all my social media, everything.
And I'm Craig at 33 Hertz Media. You can find me on Linktree and 33hertzmedia.com.
Nice. Well, I'm glad we could get everybody here together today. So
Yeah, this has been fun.
yeah, it's great.
Hell yeah. Thank you
Stuff I didn't
guys.
know about.
It's always, it's just, the more you go, it's always just more and more stuff that you didn't, we're all learning,
Yes.
These are the corners that haven't been looked at, though. And I think that's important, too, is because once
Yeah.
you start to get into those cracks and crevices, that's when you find the real boots on the ground type information.
Do you ever like go into stuff like from 10 years ago and like totally forget about it? So it's like rehearing it. It's like you got to learn it all over again anyway.
Sometimes. I mean, and that's the whole
Yeah,
thing
like
with
there's times where I do come across. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, but the modern politics, man, it's just so fast, and so
Yeah.
it's like I see it, and I have a familiar, like it's more like a big, just rounded out ball. A lot of times I have to be reminded of a lot of this stuff because honestly, I don't want to keep track of a lot of modern politics. I mean, I got better stuff to do with my time, other than the fact that we got to do something to slow down what they're doing, because they're working, there's the hidden hand working behind the scenes.
Things move so fast. So.
Yeah.
Not hidden for too much longer. I think there's a serious push right now going on to at least get rid of the system that we have from Drew onward. So that's at least a positive. I hate where we're at now. I mean, we got to inject some beauty back into the world that we live in.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But we also have to tamp down some of this globalist stuff that's going on in order to be able to, grow our flowers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for joining, and you guys all have a good day.
For sure. Thanks.
See you later.